Hello, hey, I'm Johnny. I lead the careers team at Warwick AI. And by team, I mean myself. And we run lots of career events throughout the year. And like as a finale to Warwick AI Summit this weekend, I'm going to be hosting 2 career panels, one now and one in an hour. And I'll be talking to some very smart people who worked at cool companies, and they'll basically be able to give you some hopefully interesting advice about why they chose to go and work for these companies and why they basically made these decisions and how they got in, and lots of other cool, interesting bits of knowledge. If you have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat. But the way this session will run, we'll have about 2 5 to 10 minute mini speeches by both of the people, basically introducing themselves and talking about why they made the decisions that they made to go into these companies and work and explore these things. And then after that, we'll have just open Q&A. And just for that, feel free to put any questions in the chat, and I'll pick up on some of the most interesting ones and ask these to both of our panelists. But yeah, it's awesome to begin. So if you want, Neil, I'll let you start. And then do you want to go to Michael, if that's okay?
Works for me. Should I begin now?
Yeah, sure.
Cool. So, hey, I'm Neil. I've just graduated from a maths undergraduate degree at Cambridge, and I'm taking the next year to see if AI research is for me. I'm about a month into a research project with the Future of Humanity Institute in Oxford, and in January, I'm going to be starting an internship with DeepMind. I'm very happy to chat about the application processes there, but I'm pretty shortly into this. So when trying to think about what I could have to say here that would be interesting, I don't think I've got a lot of deep AI expertise to share. So I thought I'd instead try to share some like general career advice. And something which I think is often underappreciated is I think that career choice is really, really important. Like the length of the average career is about 80,000 hours, which is a horrifically long time. And the choices you make massively shape your happiness, your lifestyle, just what you're spending your time doing, how stressed you are, and just the impact you have on the world and how the world is different from having you in it. And something which I think is pretty underappreciated here is that this is a really, really personal decision. We all have different tastes. We all have different skills. We all have different things we care about achieving. And I think it's easy to kind of forget this and just adopt the ideas from the people you see around you. Like, AI is hot, so I want to go into it. Or I want to go be a banker or a lawyer or do a PhD because that's what everyone around me is doing. And I think this is crazy. So in the spirit of this, I wanted to share a bit about why I personally feel motivated to pursue a career in AI research. And for me, a really big part of my motivation is altruism. I care a ton about making the world a better place. And I think that my career is by far the biggest lever I have to kind of shape how the world is different for having me in it. And I think that there's work in AI that is really, really important for the world. And I don't think this is at all obvious. And I think it's reasonable to be a bit skeptical when you hear somebody claim this. And I think this is a pretty complex and nuanced topic. But what I'm going to try to do is just outline roughly why I think this is plausible and an argument that should be taken seriously. And feel completely free to ask questions or email me afterwards if you want to learn more about this. So I think that when you look at history and look at the things that have, look at like why the world is the way it is today, there have been a few things that really, really mattered. There have been really good things like medical technology, like vaccines and sanitation, technology like computers, electricity, the Industrial Revolution, that have massively improved our lifestyles, wealth, and just having a world of plenty. There have been really, really bad things, like the Spanish flu that killed 3% of the entire world, World War I and World War II, totalitarian regimes like Stalinist Russia and Maoist China, and the possibility of a nuclear exchange that could have killed hundreds of millions to billions of people. And I think that when you're trying to think about how you want to have a positive impact on the world, trying to find these really big events and make them go better is a pretty important way of having an impact. And when I look at the future, I think that transformative AI is a really strong contender for the biggest deal this century. And to be clear, I don't mean current AI systems. I mean what AI could be with another 50 to 100 years of progress. Where I think it's pretty plausible that we could get to the point where we have AI that is comparable to humans or beyond humans in a lot of important areas. And I think that depending on how this goes, this could have a massive impact on human welfare. There are two big things I want to focus on here. The first is just the technical things behind how we make it, because we're making an autonomous agent and we're giving it goals and we're telling it to achieve them. And if we don't keep it under control, or we don't perfectly give it our goals, this could go really, really badly. And the way AI research normally tends to be done is that the goals you give an agent are really clean, simple, mathematical, idealized, easy to code. While the things humans care about are really hard, complicated, and messy, and really hard to encode. And I think we can see a bunch of things like this going wrong today when we look at, say, YouTube and Facebook recommender systems, of what happens when you don't perfectly encode the things you actually want. And as a case study, what could happen if we just fail at this challenge? I think gorillas are a pretty interesting thing to think about. Humans are much, much smarter than gorillas, much more powerful. And gorillas basically only exist because we want them to. Like, they're in zoos or they're in nature reserves, and they basically have zero autonomy or control over their lives. And this is not the future I want for humanity. A second thing that I think is important to think about is, even if we get all of these challenges right, the governance and policy responses to transformative AI, I think that there's a realistic chance we can make AI that is capable of doing basically everything that humans do now, but faster, cheaper, and automated. And this has potential to be one of the most economically valuable things ever invented. And I think this could go incredibly well or incredibly badly. Self-driving cars are a pretty interesting example of this. I think there's a realistic chance we get them in the next 10 years, and they have the potential to put tens of millions of people out of work, and also the potential to just add a ton to the economy. And it seems really, really important to make sure that this goes well for the world and that everyone profits from the bounty of AI, rather than destabilizing geopolitics or concentrating wealth in a couple of really powerful people. And finally, I think that there's important work that can be done on this. Just having people who care a lot about world altruism and the consequences of their work at top firms like DeepMind, I think is really important. I think there's a lot of good research that can be done on things like understanding what happens in a neural network, being robust to problems like adversarial examples, moving past these clean, simple rewards, and being able to encode semantic complexity. And I think that this is much more nuanced than just going and finding a career in AI. You need to think about the real-world consequences of your work, the things that matter, and find the highest leverage ways to make a difference. Find the things that won't happen by default, but where you, as an actor who cares about doing good, can make a really big difference by influencing the trajectory of how humanity goes over the next century. And yeah, that is my case for why I think that as an altruist, working on AI can be one of the most impactful things you can be doing.
Thanks, Neil. That's pretty cool. I think, personally, I agree with a lot of the points raised there. Yeah, and I'm just Michael, what do you sort of similar opening question? What is your background? And why did you choose to go and work at the place where you work and choose to go into AI in general, I suppose?
Hi guys. My motivation is much simpler. All my family are largely very numerical. My brother's done a PhD in physics. My little brother's in military intelligence, and my sister's a lawyer. Actually, she's the odd one out. But we all grew up playing with Lego and Technic, and my mum did a computer science degree whilst we were kids. So our house was always just numbers, and computer science was just the thing of the house. And we had this ideal role model of doing university and higher education right in front of us. So I think long story short, I went and did maths and physics at Bristol about 15 years ago. Then Bristol was wicked. It was so much fun. I absolutely loved it. My research project in my final year was like galaxy cluster cooling flows. Anyway, I can explain, but it's really cool. And I absolutely loved it. It's so much fun. So I was like, this was back in 2009, and like everyone in my university was going into banking back then. 2008, 9. I guess banking hadn't quite died as a career option back then. it was dying. But I wanted to do research. I was like, this is so much fun. It's literally just like playing with Lego, but you get to share and talk to other people, and the community's larger. And you get paid to do it. I guess it's pretty hard to make a career out of playing with Lego. So I spent a few years between undergrad and postgrad. I was living in Japan teaching English, is what a lot of people do. Then I went to Warwick for the complexity science program. It's now called Mattinson. It's a really cool program. Really enjoyed it. First year is a fully taught master's. It's pretty intense, but you learn loads of stats, and I think it's becoming more and more machine learning now since I did it. And then my PhD I haven't quite finished my corrections yet, so I'm still at the tail end of my PhD. It's in operations research in the business school, doing optimization, like machine learning, augmented optimization algorithms. And it's super cool, super awesome. My supervisor and I, we're two peas in a pod. We have these big, long, rambling discussions about lots of different things, and we got so much fun. I was quite rare that most people go into a PhD and then there's a communication barrier between them and their supervisor often, or the mission goals are a little bit misaligned, but I didn't have any of those problems. I absolutely loved it. What's next? Okay, yeah, and then I did an internship one internship in the medical school, because my wife's from Japan, and for visa issues, I needed to jump through some hoops, and one of those hoops was quit your PhD for 6 months. And my supervisor was like, hey, there's a stats group in the medical school. You could go work with them for a bit, and went and worked with them. It wasn't that much fun. It was cool. It was easy, actually. Like, coming from a more mathsy background and going into the medical school, it was like, oh, you fucking idiots, because I could do this work all day, right? Anyway, sorry, that was quite an arrogant thing to say. Then in 2017, the complexity science department in Warwick, they organised this machine learning summer school. They invited lots of Excel speakers, and one of the speakers was a research scientist from DeepMind. And I was co-organising bits and bobs of the school. And at the end of the week, we all went out for dinner and whatnot. And one thing led to another, and this DeepMind research scientist, to me, hey, send your CV. Maybe we can get you into the internship or something. 6 months later, I got an offer being like, hey, you can, let's do an internship. And I was like, woo, it's so awesome. It's so much fun. In 2018, I was at DeepMind for a few months doing an internship there. And it is, it is what everyone says it is. It's really, really intense. Everyone's insanely smart. It's super productive. There is loads of free food. There's health insurance. There's massages. You get a massage allowance. You can, I think you're one every 4 months or something like that. But I use mine up. Don't worry. They have sushi days. They have they have loads of not loads of parties, but beer on Fridays, loads of pizza. So it's everything that it's the stereotype of a tech company, a tech company that's flush with cash and really, really looks after its employees. Although there is this downside that when everything is self-contained inside the building, you come to work at 8:30, 9 a.m. You work, you don't leave the building until you finish at 6 or 7. And if you stay for dinner, you don't leave until 8 or 9. So so this idea of free food and everything is amazing. It's also a little bit wait a minute, you're kind of trapped in a bubble. Anyway, sorry. Then one of my supervisors is very well connected. He's got loads of friends in academics, and one of the people that came to Warwick to give a talk works in this works in my field, my PhD field, and he was a assistant professor at Arizona University, but he got recruited by Uber And as soon as he got recruited by Uber, it was like the last day of my DeepMind internship. He emailed me, being like, "Hey, Michael, do you want to come over to San Francisco?" And I was like, "Oh yeah, I do. That sounds awesome." So went to Uber for another internship, Uber AI Labs, which has largely been disbanded now. I think Uber has obviously they've downsized aggressively with the COVID. So the AI team's largely gone. My old manager is now Amazon. So that was fantastic fun. Absolutely loved it. Like, my wife and I absolutely love San Francisco. So good. The money is insane. Like, as an intern, I was working overtime because we were trying to get a paper for a big deadline. And I think as an intern, I was on $150K dollars. So like, Bay Area salaries are bananas. Obviously, rent was like $4,000 a month, whatever. And like, everything was crazy. So even on that money, I guess it's equivalent to like a 40K job over here. Like, someone tells you you're on 40K, you're like, man, it's pretty good. I'm a big shot now, at 40K. If you go to the Bay Area and you tell someone you're on 150K, they're like, "Oh, do you want a donation or something?" Anyway, sorry, back to the topic. So yeah, I came back from Uber, finished my PhD, then I went to a computer vision startup here in Belfast, of all places. Because when we were in London, we found it was too intense and it was too crowded, and rent is insane in London. Whereas here we've got this like really fancy luxury flat that's cheaper than one bedroom in London. In fact, check this out. You can't see, but there's actually a dock and a bay out there that we've got this massive, and this is still cheaper than one bedroom, one shared bedroom in London. So anyway, yeah, so I was at a computer vision startup for a few months, and fate changed, and I'm at another startup now that's that I can't talk about. We're in stealth mode, but it's wicked cool, it's wicked fun. And so I guess the overall theme to my life choices have largely been, does that look wicked? I want to go do it. Like, it's basically, so it's the exact opposite of altruism. It's pure selfishness. Yeah. To summarize.
Okay, that's like pretty cool, like, and like pretty also quite different life summaries, or like motivation summaries. I wouldn't say like entirely different. I think there's probably some overlap, but still like quite interesting to hear from both of you. So we've already got some questions in the chat, and I might just like fire these off. And if either of you wants to answer them or thinks like you're more suited to answer them, so for example, if there's like a question about DeepMind, which both of you have like interviewed / got offers from / work there, or for you, Michael, then just feel free to like be like, yeah, I want to answer this question, or like, no, I don't want to answer this question. If both of you don't want to answer it, then like I'm more than happy to move on to another question. Okay, awesome. So I have one question from Tom, which I presume is for Neel, which was, can you like go into a little bit more detail about like this process? It's like working from an undergrad to going and starting at FHI. What did that look like?
Sure. Just to de-jargon, FHI is the Future of Humanity Institute, which is the institute in Oxford I'm currently working with, whose research mandate is basically anything to do with making the long-term future of humanity go well. I don't really have a ton of interesting things to say here, to be entirely honest. I knew a researcher at FHI. There was this position I'm currently doing, the AI Alignment Visiting Fellowship, and I emailed about it, and we had a chat, and he suggested that I apply, and the application process was fairly informal, but I believe it's listed on the website for anyone else who's interested in this. It's a fairly flexible position. The typical person is somebody who like has their own clear research interests and ideally research experience. I'm a bit of an unusual person to be doing it because I'm very much, I think research is cool, but I have no idea what I'm doing. Can I help somebody with their research for a few months and like use them to give me interesting ideas that I could then try to do something with. And they seem pretty fine with this. I don't think I have much interesting to say for how to get this kind of position beyond, I think, the fact that I had pretty good grades and a pretty strong maths background was pretty well received.
Okay, that's cool. I think like I sort of seen this like running theme along most people, or like not even most people, just like the people who I've talked to at these companies. I'm not saying this like representative, but most of them seem to be like A, like pretty good at maths, and then B, seem to just like really enjoy finding out about new ideas and like really just like super curious, I think. Yeah. So not like exact, this is like the 100% life hack on how to get in, but this seems to be like just pattern spotting. This seems to be something that most people at these companies like will follow, and trying to like force your way in seems like just like training for it seems like difficult, to be honest.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if that's
I guess one other thought I might want to add is, so a term that gets thrown around quite a lot when it comes to getting careers is networking. And I think there's been a bit of a theme in what both me and Michael have said. And I think if there's one bit of advice I can take on the boost about networking, it's to, one, do it and talk to people. But two, don't just talk to the people who you think will be useful and just kind of think of networking as, I'm going to talk to people who are cool and high status and add them on LinkedIn. This will magically get me jobs. I think networking is about just being an interesting person to talk to, liking people, making friends, and like just being somebody who people want to be around. And the people who work at cool high status companies are people too. And they like talking to people who are genuinely, sincerely interested in their work. They can generally tell if you're not interested and you're just like trying to get close to them because you think it'll be useful to you. And just try to make sincere connections. Don't really have like a clear, concrete plan. And I think if you do this enough, opportunities will kind of appear in your life. And that this is much more effective than like trying really hard.
Yeah, I would very strongly second that. Like my opportunities, I'd never applied for DeepMind. I literally just, this person said to me, email me your CV. And I was like, oh, okay. That's a shot in the dark, isn't it? And again, my Uber thing as well, I never formally applied. And I guess even for the job I got afterwards, even for it was AnyVision. AnyVision is this, yeah, they got 70 million in funding from Microsoft last year. So like they've raised a lot of capital. They're doing pretty well. Yeah, the application process for them as well was like some guy emailed me on LinkedIn and was like, do you want to apply for this thing? And I was like, Belfast? And but it's all very kind of, there was no strategy to it. It was just have fun, go with the flow, and then things just start happening. Like I got an email a few weeks ago from, so I'm collaborating with some guys in Zurich, and from another PhD student I met at a conference when we've been working together on some things, and now one of his supervisors is a guy at UCI in California, and he emailed me a few weeks ago being like, hey Michael, do you want to come to California, and if there's a postdoc position, you might be your kind of thing. And again, I never applied for anything. It was just we talk, we meet, we hang out, and you talk, you meet, you hang out, and it only takes 1 or 2 meetings for someone to be like, okay, yeah, let's do something. Or, maybe we can do something. So, yeah, so being available and enjoying it, I think would be that's what I've done. Like, I don't know. I mean, maybe there are insincere ways to play the game and like climb the greasy pole, but I don't know. You have to be really good at it to get through, I guess. To really like acting.
So there's a question for you, Michael, which is, so obviously you worked at like these 2 like very large, like for Uber and then for DeepMind, and then you chose to go and like work for a startup. This is like pretty non-standard choice, I would say. Yeah, it seems that like, like there's sort of this term like golden handcuffs, and once people join really large tech firms, they tend to stay there for a while. Like what was your reasoning behind going to work for this startup? and like what? Yeah, basically, why did you make this decision?
So my PhD was operations research, and I think there was a culture clash when I went to DeepMind because they're all about machine learning, and well, of course they're all about machine learning, DeepMind, right? So I had a bit of a bumpy time when I was in my DeepMind. Like the science itself I absolutely loved it, but like my managers, again, super nice, super lovely people, but there were a lot of questions that I was like, I don't understand this. Like, why are we doing that? Why are we doing that? And we just didn't have time to build this bridge, to build this communication bridge. So at the end of my internship, I was like, yeah, thanks, but no thanks. Like this is too intense, and I can't keep up. Or I would say at the end, I was like, I kind of want to work on my own problem. I do want to work on the same problems, but I'm working them in my way, and I want to know why I'm doing it. Because we were working on like a toy data application, and anyway, so at the end of my internship, I felt just a bit like, this is kind of like the science is cool, but the culture is it wasn't for me. And they didn't make me an offer. And if they had, I don't know if I would have accepted it. It would have been I would have probably accepted it just to be like, I know it's safe, but Uber did make me a job offer, but we couldn't get the visa. Like it's Trump basically. Well, I mean, it's tempting to blame Trump, but couldn't. They tried really hard. Like the team and the HR were bending over backwards, being like, what are the visas available? What can we do? What can we do? And like H1Bs had run out at the time, and this is So again, we really wanted to stay. We absolutely loved it. My wife's Japanese, and so San Francisco is a half Asian, half Caucasian city. So like both of us, we just felt right at home. It was gorgeous. So basically, those two options, those doors were closed. We're still writing papers. I still collaborate with my Uber manager, and I have no doubt if I said to him one day, "Hey, you can have a job at Amazon," he'll be like, "Hell yeah, let's go, let's do it." Yeah, and he'd make things happen. So I was on the job market, and the position I'm at, the computer vision startup I went to, it was in Belfast, and here rent is nothing. Like you can buy like a 5-bedroom house with like a conservatory, garden, and dual garage for like 350 grand, and they were paying. So the starting salary, the computer vision company was 85K, and I was like, damn, that is a 1% of salary in Northern Ireland. That is holy cow. And lockdown was coming in, so this was back in like February, March. So a new lockdown was coming. So the job market is going to evaporate. And then I got this really lucrative offer in a really low cost living area. And the job itself was deep learning researcher. So my day job was reading papers, implementing things, trying things out, just tinkering, and is a boy in a playground was basically the day job. And it was really cool. So that's how I ended up where I am right now. And as I said, a big part of my motivation for why I work is just stuff is cool. Stuff's really fun. So I still communicate with my PhD supervisor every week. We're still writing papers. And again, my Uber guy, an Amazon guy, we communicate all the time. At Zurich, we've got the team, some guys at Zurich who communicate with loads. There's some guys at Cambridge. We've just submitted a paper as well, another paper with some guys in Cambridge. So for me, the fun of the job is just literally doing the science and the maths and like tinkering and playing around. And anywhere I can do that, or anytime I can do that.
Yeah. So I think like a sort of common theme is that to apply and get into these companies, like I think also need to be like just good at like all of the things I previously talked about, but you also need to be like quite good at learning and like learning things quickly. So I think at least a personal question I have for myself, and a question that's kind of been raised, is like, what resources did you learn to use it to learn AI? But I'm more interested in like when you sit down to learn something, when you sit down to read a paper and learn about these things, like what is like your strategy to like understand it and like break down or like just learn it? And yeah, basically like it's sort of a big question, but like how do you learn these things? Because I think that would be useful for people who are like still like quite young or like doing the undergrad and then are like learning about these resources and just basically want to get like really awesome and really good at them, so then they can apply and get into these companies. Yeah, so not such a career-related question, but I still think it's a pretty useful question. So yeah, maybe Neil, if you want to start, and then Michael can take.
Sure. So I think for learning machine learning, I'm a really big fan of the Fast AI course. That the URL is just fast.ai. I think it's basically a very fast, rapid crash course in modern deep learning that gets you able to actually make things really quickly. And I think it's really well explained. And I recommend just go there first if you want to get into machine learning. I think the how to learn well is a much, much more interesting question, though. And maybe before I talk about my personal learning style, I think that the main thing to think about when learning is that it's a really personal process. There are lots of different approaches to learning, and the thing that works best for you is not going to be the thing that works best for the person next to you. And I think that the right response in this situation is to try lots of things, be creative, experiment, iterate, and find the ones that do work for you and stick with those. I have a long blog post with my thoughts on how to learn things well that hopefully we could send to participants afterwards if they're interested. For me, one of the really key things about learning is I think of learning as compressing lots of vague random ideas into a few key insights. And I see the entire process of learning as having lots of information going into my head, figuring out what's important, the 20% that has 80% of all of the insight, and throwing away everything else. And I build my entire learning process around doing this as efficiently as possible. One thing that I think is kind of underappreciated is teaching. I think teaching something is a really good way to get these insights, because when you're talking, it's kind of awkward to ramble and say things that has zero content. And when you're thinking about how to explain something to somebody else, it forces you to confront what you do know and what you don't know. So I've given 3 lectures on machine learning, and I think most of what I've learned about machine learning I got from preparing for those. And low effort forms of things are just explaining something to friends, writing a blog post about it, writing up some notes and just sending it around to people. Just anything which is taking the ideas out of your head and putting them out there.
Yeah. I would say, for me, look on YouTube for there's someone on YouTube who's dumbed it down to a really nice, intuitive, clean level. The David Silver reinforcement learning lectures are just, they are beautiful. Every time he explains a concept, he's like, okay, now let's get out of the math for a second. And okay, I've got a robot, and this is what I want it to do, and I want it to go there. Blah, blah, blah. He explains everything in a very kind of hand-wavy, animated, very visual, graphical, hands-on feeling. And every time I want to learn something new, I'll find a YouTube lecturer who has dumbed it down and just made it nice. I've never tried any of the online courses, though, like Fast AI or Coursera. And
Well, that's cool. And I suppose, at least for me, it's pretty shocking that, I don't know, people who've managed to do such cool things. And I think there's a thing that most people, or a mistake, common misconception that most people make is that they think the best way to learn things is to find the hardest resource out there and then just work really hard on getting that, rather than just find an easy thing that contains lots of really intuitive great understanding, and then build your intuition, and then just nail that and then build up from there. I think this seems to me a pretty good way to learn. Okay, another question. How do you know? And this is an interesting thing from someone who isn't doing a PhD to someone who just finished one. How do you know if you would go and basically upsides, downsides of doing PhD? Is it worth it? Would you do it again if you had the chance? Neil, are you currently considering doing a PhD? Yeah, basically, what are your thoughts on this? Either one of you.
Okay. For me, I knew it was a pretty easy choice for me. I was like, I love this. It's awesome. And again, for my I think the rest of my siblings as well, we grew up on a farm that didn't have a TV. So our childhood was going out and climbing trees and fixing bikes. And we made I remember we made a potato cannon once, and the neighbors came around and told us off for shooting guns. So I guess we'd already, So tinkering and playing and is it's just fun. It's just fun. And then a PhD is a very intentional choice to have a career that goes into this tinkering and messing about. And I bet a lot of software developers probably say the same thing, or web developers. They're like, hey, yeah, you've got a cool problem, you're trying to solve it. Like my day job is tinkering. So that's what I felt like, and yeah.
Yeah, and I suppose for you, like having like a great supervisor probably like made everything like quite a lot worth it.
Absolutely.
What are
Communication.
Your thoughts?
So I guess for me, I mean, I've just graduated. I have no idea what the hell I'm doing with my life. And I think that the correct reaction when you have no idea what you're doing with your life is to just try lots of things and try to get as much information as you can. And that's what I'm spending the next year doing. And hopefully I'll have a much better idea of whether I want to do a PhD at the end of this than I do now. My current impression is that it wouldn't be a great fit for me. I think that PhDs tend to be great for people who want to narrowly specialize into something and work in a very high autonomy, very low feedback, long feedback loop environment. And I think that's something that some people really thrive on, but isn't something that I find particularly exciting. And I think that the general advice I've heard is that for people who are uncertain they want to do a PhD, the time to try something else is before you do a PhD, not afterwards. Because if you want to be an academic and you take time off after a PhD, that's terrible for your career. But if you try something before doing a PhD and you find that this thing that doesn't need a PhD is awesome, then you don't need to. On the other hand, if you're just really, really excited about doing research and you find an area which you'd love to spend 3 years of your life digging into, I think doing a PhD is a great idea. Again, careers are a personal choice, and my views are just my views and should not be yours.
Yeah, this seems cool generally. Questions?
Yeah, I wonder if I can elaborate on that.
Sorry, go for it, Michael.
Yeah, like you say, for a lot of people, a PhD is a lonely process. I think my supervisor, again, is a really good communicator. So as I was saying, when you want to learn something new, find someone who's dumbed it down hard enough to your level that it's just really easy to pick up. Because no topic is too hard to be dumbed down to be easy to pick up. Like, always my personal thought. And my supervisor is one of those people. So in our very first few meetings, like at the very beginning of my PhD, we would really break it down, find something easy that can be implemented, that I can show him the results next week. And it wouldn't surprise me if a lot of supervisors don't put that much effort in to lower the level, to break down break down all the ignorance, to overcome all the ignorance and whatnot. So I think, okay, so I guess my conclusion would roughly be anyone can do a PhD. You just got to find the supervisor who just clicks, and the supervisor who complements the things that you lack, and can accommodate like the things you have and you don't have, and then at the end of 3 years, you'll have done something, and you'll either be like, that was a lot of fun, I really enjoyed that, I want to do it more, or you'll be like, that was okay. Or some people, it just crashes and burns, and I just say it becomes a lonely slog for 3 years, and they get to call themselves doctor at the end, but then they haven't got papers, they haven't enjoyed themselves. It's been an unproductive 3 years. So choosing the supervisor is a huge thing, I think.
Yeah. I suppose out of this I have not really related, but a larger question. So currently both of you work in tech adjacent fields, or quite tech interested fields. In the past, Neel, you worked in quant finance, so I'm not sure how tech adjacent this is, but it seems to sort of sit between banking and tech. I'm not sure if this analysis is correct.
Pretty tech adjacent.
Yeah. I suppose so. My big question is why, and basically this question is aimed at or reflective of a lot of work students basically end up becoming working for banks or working for consultancy firms and basically spending all their time doing banking. I'm just interested as to why you chose to go and work for tech as opposed to these companies. What was your rationale there? like, yeah, why not banking? Like, I have like a idea of what you might say, but I just would like to like, clarify that for people out there.
Sure. So I guess for me, I've tried out some internships in quant finance, which is the only bit of banking I would ever touch, I think. And honestly, I actually found it really fun. I think the people were really smart and really great. The pay was excellent. It really felt like a place where people would invest a lot in me and my growth. And I think there's still a realistic chance I get back there. Um, I think for me, the main relevant factor is the point of altruism I was making at the start. Um, I think that for anyone who is considering going into banking, you should very seriously consider donating a pretty large portion of your salary. I think that the amount you earn in banking is utterly insane, and you can have a really great, comfortable lifestyle while also donating a lot of money to really good, really effective causes. And I actually think that if you do that, the amount of good you can do is pretty competitive with a lot of other careers. But I don't think it's that competitive with directly doing research on really important problems. And I'm trying to see if that is the path for me or not.
Okay, that's fair
If
enough.
you don't care about altruism, I think most of those arguments don't really apply. And the question is just, what do you find fun and motivating? And there you should think about things like lifestyle, work-life balance, who your co-workers will be, whether it's somewhere you think you'll grow, whether it's something you find stressful or sustainable and rejuvenating, and just try things.
Yeah, this seems cool. Michael, I don't know if you've had like any experience with banks, but like you strike me as like someone who wouldn't like touch banking like with a 10-foot pole.
So as soon as you put on LinkedIn anything to do with AI and machine learning, hedge fund people will start spamming you. And they'll be like, hey, we're working in, I did get one email that was like, we're a startup doing crypto, trading, AI. And that, as soon as I saw those words, I was like, crap, man, that's absolute porn for investors and absolute murder for people who work there, right? Like, I imagine if there's probably management in that company that don't know what Bayesian means. Like, I know a guy, one of the guys I'm working with now, or I've worked with recently. He was at a company getting paid insane money, and the managers were all like salesy, execsy, and they'd made this new company that was like a software development company. And he'd been recruited in as like a head software engineer, and the managers and the sales team had like made loads of promises that were just impossible to deliver. And so he quit after 4 weeks. He was like, and I wonder, it wouldn't surprise me if a lot of like financing startups probably have that feel. That's my stereotype, purely a stereotype. But I do have a lot of friends in hedge funds. Hedge funds, I assume this is an overlap with quant finance. I don't know if it's the same thing or not. But hedge funds do scout a lot of AI graduates. And they claim to like provide similar working conditions to tech companies, like free food, work-life balance, loads of perks, like no uniforms, like everything. They claim to create like a nerdy environment. And I've got good friends who've gone to hedge funds, and yeah, they've been there for years now, so they're doing all right. They don't mind it. And for me, I guess it's a backup plan. It's always it's an idea that's there. Like if I can go and do cool maths, I'm quite happy to do it. So yeah, I'm not hard for or against it.
Interesting. And I suppose it's sort of like finishing / final question is, so most of the audience I expect will be undergrad students / people who've recently graduated from an undergrad STEM degree. I assume this like sums up maybe 90% of the people watching. And then for these people who like want to get into AI in the future / work in AI related job, like, what sort of advice would you have for them? Like general things, like even like general broad life advice, but preferably stuff that's actionable and like they can actually do rather than just I know this is a pretty broad question, but I think like it would probably be helpful to most people watching. So either of you, maybe start Neel. Yeah,
I'm happy to. Sure. So I think maybe I'm best placed to give advice to people who are like not immediately looking for jobs right now. And I think that one thing that students often don't do enough of is just investing in themselves and investing in gaining skills and investing in becoming as awesome as they possibly can by the time they graduate. This links back to what I was saying earlier about learning. I think that investing a lot of time and effort into getting the meta skills like learning, time management, being productive, having social skills, meeting people and networking, investing lots of time into getting those right while you're young and you have loads of time ahead of you just pays massive returns over the rest of your life. Like if you're 10% faster at learning things, that's not that big a deal over the next year, but over the next 20 years, that's a massive deal. As for things that are actionable, in specifically the context of AI, I would recommend that people just try to make something, do self-study, learn about AI. Again, I think the Fast AI course is really good for this. And just find something you think is interesting and try to make it. I think that project-driven learning is a really, really good approach to anything to do with AI, tech, or programming. A common reaction when I give people this advice is people just have no idea what they want to work on. And I think that's pretty understandable. But if that's your position, then my advice to you would be set yourself out like half an hour, sit down somewhere with a blank sheet of paper, and just try brainstorming lots of random crap you could potentially make. Have as low a bar as possible, and just babble whatever comes in your head onto that page. And just give yourself a solid amount of time. And at the end of it, see if any of it seems interesting. I'm giving this advice because I think it's really easy to confuse the feeling of this is harder than I can solve in 10 seconds, and this is impossible to solve. And I think a lot of people who struggle to come up with projects are on the this is harder than can be done in 10 seconds and just give up. And I think it's sad to miss out on a potential awesome project just because you're not willing to spend half an hour's worth of effort pushing through that and generating things. Yeah. I think if you do have some kind of interesting project or skills, this is something that companies take really seriously. Like if you have an awesome GitHub that has something interesting on there, that opens a lot of doors.
Yeah. So build awesome things, and specifically, like I think I remember talking to you a while ago, or maybe I read like a blog post where it was basically this rule that if you're like stuck or like you can't think of ideas, just like spending 5 minutes like with a blank sheet of paper, like writing down potential solutions, just like allows you to think of a bunch of things, and like 5 minutes really isn't long enough of a time for like anyone to be like, oh no, this isn't worth spending time on. Like you can just literally spend 5 minutes writing down potential solutions to like most things in your life, like projects you want to work on, like career options, anything like that. And that like might generate a lot of interesting insights that you might have thought of previously.
Yep. Yeah. I have a timer that I keep on my desk, and I can just set it to 5 minutes whenever I want to do this. And I find that pretty helpful. Again, I think the key point here is that the feeling of this is hard and the feeling of this is impossible feel the same, but mean very, very different things. And thinking for at least 5 minutes is how you tell the difference. And yeah, maybe the summary I'd give is less make awesome projects and more try to become awesome yourself. And making something and going out of the world and doing things is one of the most effective ways to become awesome.
You heard it here first. Okay, Michael, what sort of advice do you have? Yeah,
I would mirror that advice exactly. Like, pick a mini project and just get to grips with. Or pick a mini project, either one you can do yourself that you make out of the blue, or the one that I would just start with, absolutely random, is the Lunar Lander. In the OpenAI gym, it's this really cute little robot control problem. I'll put it in the Facebook, in the YouTube chat. But it's just a little robot, right? It's flying around, and it has like some parameters. It says, if I'm tilting too far to the left, turn on my right booster. If I'm tilting too far to the right, turn on my left booster. And it has these really like hands-on little controls. And optimize this thing, like play with the numbers, play with it, tweak it around, put it in a scikit-learn optimizer or something. I would like the OpenAI gym is a bunch of cool toy little problems that are really fun. I use them in my actual research, like, but you know, a high school student could use them. There's no fancy statistics or deep Q learning or anything like that. It's just when do I turn on my left booster? Up now, or depending on how out of control I am. And it's really fun. So treat learning ML like the same as treat it the same as trying to learn how to use a Raspberry Pi, is what I would say. Exactly as Neel says. Like don't think of it as a big goal or anything. Just be like, here's a cool thing. This is a cool thing I want to play with. Play with it. Like, don't forget about papers and the big picture. Just pick some nice low hanging fruit and have fun with it. And then, yeah, a year or two of that is basically a PhD.
Okay, yeah, really cool like advice on both sides, I think. Yeah, like this playfulness is something that I think can be like lost on many students, especially when it comes to think about careers. Like we have this like image of like professional life just being like 9 to 5 kind of like following tasks that someone else gives you that like, yeah, found very interesting. And like building a playfulness attitude is actually like valued at a lot of top companies. There's probably like a wide misconception that people have. Okay,
and it's sustainable. Sorry.
Yeah.
Like, if you actually enjoy it, you'll keep on doing it for 20 years, and you'll just be productive. You'll be productive for free, right? Without effort, without pushing yourself.
Yeah. Awesome. Okay. If both of you like want to drop off now, that'll be lovely, and we'll pause the stream for a moment, and then later on we'll resume with some more software engineering type people, and yeah. All right. But thank you both so much for coming. Like, I really appreciated it, and I'm sure like lots of students out there like find your advice fairly impactful, and like definitely useful and actionable. Yeah. So thank you both so much.
Especially about doing good in AI, they can feel totally free to email me. My contact information's on my blog. And I see there's a few questions in the chat we haven't got to. So if I can jot down a few thoughts in the next few minutes before the next thing starts.
Yeah, if you want to, sure, go for it.
But yeah, thanks a lot for inviting me.
Hey, hello, I'm Jonathan. I currently run the careers team for Warwick AI, alongside studying maths at Warwick here. So here we've got with me today Zoe and Amir. And they're gonna introduce themselves and talk a bit about what their motivations for working where they currently work. And then after that, we'll just basically chat. And please keep questions coming in the chat, and I'll basically be able to ask them to either of them. And yeah, we'll see where it goes. And if there are any technical problems, we apologize, but the stream should run until around 3:55, at which point we'll have some closing remarks from Connor, our president. Okay, lovely. So if you just maybe want to start, Amir, and give us an intro, and then we can move on to Zoe.
Yeah, hey everyone. My name's Amir. I graduated from Warwick last year in the M-Math, and I have an incoming offer to join McKinsey, the consultancy firm, very soon. Right now, I'm working on two main startups. One is my baby. It's called Education Equation. We're kind of changing the education landscape insofar as connecting parents, schools, and teachers together. I'm working. I work there as a CEO, and I'm also working. I'm programming myself as a CTO on a kind of careers-based platform that I'm working on at the moment. I suppose for me, what really drives me and what I love doing is building interesting things and trying to actually have an impact and really change things. And even if you're at a young age, knowing and believing that is 100% possible. And secondly, it's, I do a lot of work on LinkedIn in terms of helping people with their careers. So if you have any questions, feel free to drop me a message. And it's really about opening up the opportunities and breaking information asymmetry that a lot of people have. They don't know how to get into certain careers. Often they're very elitist, and you don't have the information. So I work on trying to give out as much of that as possible and sort of level that playing field.
All right, cool. Really nice to meet you, Amir, as well. So hi, everyone. I'm Zoe. I'm a recent grad from the University of St. Andrews. So sorry, I didn't go to Warwick, but I do really love the university. And I know Johnny because we currently are working at a startup called Figo. So about me, I studied computer science at St. Andrews, graduated in June of 2020, and I started at Palantir Technologies in September 2020. So been working there for about 2 months now as a forward deployed software engineer. So the first question I always get is, what is that? So essentially, I'm a software engineer, but I work directly with clients. So that's kind of the deployed bit. I'm working with one of our commercial clients. I can't actually say who it is, but I can definitely talk about some of the things that I do there day to day if you have those kind of questions. I guess my motivations are fairly similar to Amir's as well. The reason that I'm working at Palantir and why I really wanted to work there is because they work on really impactful work. So for example, they're helping with the NHS with their COVID relief and pandemic guidance. And, I just think that that's a very, very important thing to do. And the impact that they have sort of on the world and on these governments and how they work, I think that that's really, really interesting. And to be able to work on really important things is something that I really enjoyed. For me, it's about making the most impact and also just doing the right thing with technology.
Nice. And both of them, like normal, are being way too humble. So previously, Amir ran this 11 plus company that seemed really cool, and I think got quite a large amount of traction as well. And then he also interned at McKinsey over summer. And then Zoe also worked in technology at Morgan Stanley and Barclays over summers, and also received offers from Google. They're both super smart, and if you have questions relating to those things, I think they would be happy to answer them, even though they didn't initially mention them. So both two super smart people. Okay, so I suppose I have a opening question for myself, which was, I suppose both of you have worked for startups in the past, / currently you run your own. Me and Zoe work together in a startup. What is this reasoning for why startups? I think this is an area a lot of students really don't know a lot about. And just if you want to talk a bit about why startups are cool places to work, really, I suppose.
I think like startups are really cool because even at like a young age, like we are still like quite young people, you can have high ownership about what you're doing. You can really drive the company culture and have an impact on, the work that you're actually doing. Usually, I was a founding member of FIGO. I've had a lot of impact in like the direction that we're taking, particularly with the machine learning. So I'm in the machine learning department with Johnny. But yeah, like I've had a lot of impact in terms of, help with the logo to like how we hire people to onboarding, and you just get this breadth of knowledge and like work that you are allowed to sort of like work on. And I think that's just so amazing, because actually working for a super big company, you can learn a lot, because they've been around for a while, but in terms of the change that you can make, it is slower than that startup. A startup from day one, you can be pushed on a high priority task, and that's super exciting.
Yeah, absolutely. Just want to echo everything Zoe said. I think for me, a lot of people think of startups as very high risk if you're starting one, which is true. Like, obviously, there is a large amount of risk involved, but the amount that you learn is, I cannot compare it to anything else. The most I've learned was during my first business, and it was like the process of those failures and really understanding how everything works from a holistic point of view teaches me more about business than I've ever done any other period of my life. Like through years of economics or whatever, that has single-handedly taught me the most. And I think like even if you like it might not go well, that because you have to have the holistic view, as Zoe said, like you have to understand every aspect of the business. You are responsible for that. You have to know it. So you're not a cog in a machine, rather you are the machine. Like you are necessarily driving that. And that level of understanding makes you smarter because you have to understand how everything works. And I think that's the reason why I became a consultant. The only reason I was good at that was because I learned so much from my first business.
Awesome. And I suppose, so this is like another sort of like playing a bit of devil's advocate here. So startups have like a very high failure rate, and I suppose a lot of students might be concerned that like shit, it's just gonna fail, right? Like, and there's no point building a career here. It's just gonna be like 2 years or 3 years of my life wasted. What sort of things might you say to like persuade them that's not the case, or even if like that is true, then yeah, thoughts here.
Do you want to answer, Zoe, or shall I? Shall I say?
I can jump on this first then. I think like the one thing there is knowledge is, oh, sorry. I think maybe there was like a small lag there. What I was just going to say is that I think knowledge is never a waste. And the things that you'll learn, as Amir said, from those failures, you'll never lose. And so actually, it means that going into something else, you'll know like what the mistakes were before, and you'll know how to avoid them. I also don't think that this idea that you worked for somewhere for 3 years, maybe the startup failed. Why did it fail? Why what could you have done to maybe stop it from failing? And that knowledge, like you can apply that to anything. Like the next thing you do, or if like, you're applying to a company, they're not just going to say, oh, you wasted 3 years of your life. They're going to say, wow, this person has learned a lot and faced a lot of adversity, and is probably quite a resilient person as well. So you can always sort of like spin it for your benefit.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't think like all hope is lost. Like, I definitely want to echo what Zoe said. 100% agree. Like, moreover, I think life is all about trade-offs, right? And there are risks involved in every single thing we do, every single point in time. And startups may not be right for everyone. That is the case. Like, you may want a career which has higher job security. You may value that, over perhaps having more ownership. Maybe you just want to start a family. You want to live a comfortable life, and do something a 9 to 5 you kind of enjoy. And there's nothing wrong with that, and that's absolutely fine. But you've got to make those value judgments about what you care about in your own life. And yeah, everything is about trade-offs, right? And you should be aware of the risks, the pros and cons that come with different things, and be realistic about them and make your judgments with the information you have at the time. And that's all you can hold yourself to. So, there are risks, but if it's right for you, then go ahead, take it.
Yeah, I think this is a pretty cool point. So one question we've got in the chat is that, like, how common is it? Like, so what's the degree breakdown in your respective companies? And I think maybe like a cool underlying question behind that is sort of like, what skill set is required to succeed at your companies, and like, does the degree that you take necessarily train you well in those skill sets?
Well, I suppose we're going to answer slightly differently. So I think, I'm a very early stage startup. So I know, obviously, the way it might differ will be different. But I think for me, there are four main skill sets I think are really essential in a startup. And obviously, some individuals could have more of these, but I think someone who has a high level thinking and strategic outlook could be multiple people, like kind of your classic consultant. I really love someone who can fill a CTO role, who can do the tech, who can do that kind of stuff. And then you need someone who's good at design, or at least has some way of designing things in your MVP. And finally, I'm thinking sales, some sort of sales or marketing, social media, some sort of like distribution channels. For me, those are the most crucial. Your degree can help in the sense that it makes you smarter. Sometimes a computer science degree helps you in the coding aspect. You don't need it. You can learn a lot of the skills. My degree was mathematics. I also do programming as well. So you don't need them necessarily. You can often teach yourself. And often the process of doing a startup, you end up teaching yourself as well. Obviously, if you're working as a career, I'm sure Zoe can give more insight there. But that's if you're doing a very early stage, like your own startup, which is what I did, those are the kind of skill sets you may wish to have, or at least a decent proportion of those.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really good answer from Amir. I guess on the other side then, if you're working sort of as a career, like I'm a software engineer, so I'm always going to be speaking about this or it's something like in this realm. So I think to be a software engineer in sort of like a big tech company, you do need to have those like fundamental problem solving skills. And yes, you need to be able to answer those problems with code, but I don't think you need a computer science degree to do that. I think it helps and it definitely gives you that like knowledge of like computer systems and networking and databases, which are things that maybe you wouldn't think like, oh, I should probably go out and like learn that. But it's not something that you like need a degree in order to do. So I would say the degree like breakdown is definitely computer science, maths, physics is probably the most that I've heard. I'd say more heavily weighted on computer science and maths than physics. But that's like for my particular role. I think for the other roles, I've seen people who did like philosophy, chemistry, biology, so like still sciencey subjects. But I think the thing there is like, are you working with hard problems? Do you need to break down your problem in order to solve it? And also we're going to be working quite like high stress environments. So like, is your degree pushing you? And if it is, then it's definitely a degree that's applicable. If you didn't do computer science or maybe you're not familiar with coding, there might be some things that you need to sort of like go over, but you just need to go over the basics and really be comfortable with a computer science language or like a programming language. And then, yeah, some things about networking and maybe general database stuff. But that's if you want to be a software engineer.
Yeah, so I suppose like summary to both of those answers is that like being able to build things and solve problems is like just supremely useful skill. And yeah, just solving hard problems seems like just number one skill set across both boards, because working in a startup or like as a consultant is like what you do, and yeah, just being good at this. And I suppose a large part of that is also persistence, because hard problems are hard for a reason, right? Like they're not solved overnight, and you need like some long stretches of work to do that. Awesome. I suppose I have a question, which is like what does the day-to-day work look like for either of you? Like maybe for you, Amir, like both at McKinsey and working for startups, and then for you, Zoe, working as a full deployed software engineer at Palantir, and maybe also touch on how that differs from like if you're a normal software engineer at Palantir.
So I think the first thing there is like, what's the difference between a software engineer at Palantir and a forward deployed software engineer? So the main difference is if you're a software engineer, you're just building like the product and you're working with like other Palantirians to build out like Palantir software essentially. And if you're a forward deployed software engineer, you're working directly with a client to help build out, systems and like ways to sort of solve their day-to-day problems using Palantir software, but also building out custom things. So you're both programming, but I think the main difference is the meetings. And this is like a very common sort of joke that I spend 50% of my time in meetings, almost I would say like similar to a consultant, but definitely like doesn't cover the like holistic view that maybe a consultant would. But yeah, talking about what do you do day to day as a client? Like, how can I help you? And then, trying to, build something that like works for them. It takes a lot of iteration. So yeah, I might start the morning with like a stand up with my team and then go into a client stand up. So where like we're saying like, what are you doing today? What am I doing? And then going into like a meeting directly with a client. So maybe one-on-one, where she's like breaking down her problem and we're talking through like something there. And then I go out and build it, maybe have like a random meeting with someone else at Palantir because we're really big on that. But yeah, that's sort of what my day looks like. 50% meetings, 50% coding.
Yeah, I think for me, if you're an early stage startup, it very much differs from working in like a firm. So working at somewhere like McKinsey, very much kind of mirroring actually what Zoe said, even though it's kind of different. You start with a stand up in the morning, you kind of align, see what you want to achieve, kind of have midday check-ins, that kind of thing, see how you're doing. During this time, you might be producing Excel models, you might be producing slides, you might be problem solving on specific issues, you might be speaking to the client, a variety of tasks. You work on that throughout the day. You speak to your manager. Maybe the partner comes in the room. You kind of debrief there. At the end of the day, you have a checkout, and normally you end up working past this time. But you agree what's going to be done for tomorrow. What you're like, okay, it's reasonable that by tomorrow morning I'd have this finished. And you check out, and you kind of do that, and that kind of repeats Monday to Thursday. You might be on client site, obviously not during COVID, but and then Friday you're kind of actually in your home office. So, for example, if I'm working in a tech company for a tech company client, I would be there Monday to Thursday, and on the Friday I'll be in the McKinsey offices. Startup life is very, very different. It's a lot more ad hoc. By its nature, an early stage startup, you kind of want to be iterating a lot, so you don't have as much of a plan. You have your hypotheses of what you want to test. You're speaking to users, you're coding, you're strategizing. You're often iterating on the fly. A lot of that is more exciting, and it's also more sporadic, so it's more difficult to predict. But yeah, you're often programming, iterating, speaking to users, and a lot of things can change very, very quickly, depending on the kind of feedback you get, or you might decide to scrap entire projects, but that's why you work lean. So I hope that gives an insight into both those.
Yeah, I also feel like I should jump in and say that actually because of COVID, I completely forgot that this is part of my role, but I just unfortunately haven't been able to do it. So forward deployed software engineers also travel a lot. So I'm supposed to be on client side sort of like Tuesday to Thursday and stuff like that. So as I said, it is like slightly similar to like a consultant, but definitely very different as well.
Yeah, and this is something that like I suppose since I know both of you like quite well, but something that I haven't really asked and something that I think might be interesting. So this like we've talked a little bit about what you're currently doing, and I'm sort of interested to see like long term, like what sort of things do you want to be doing? Do you want to like be working in the same roles? Like, yeah, what are your future plans?
I suppose I'll answer first this time. For myself, I want to see where these startups go. I'm in a very early stage right now, and they may fail, they may not do well. And my current plan is to see where they go. I want to try and get some seed funding, and at some point try to expand the team, and kind of just see whether we can hit that product market fit. Obviously, if that happens, amazing. If not, maybe work as a consultant, maybe go work in VC, something like that. I haven't really thought about it. I haven't thought about what my backup plan is in case I fail. But I'm sure something will pop up. But my main thing is I really want to work in startups and kind of do that. And it's what I care about. And for me, I care about doing what I love and loving every single day. I know it's hard to say that during COVID, but like I really like want to prioritize that above all else. And that's what I personally care about. That's why I'm working on this stuff.
Yeah, I guess for me then, so I'm like really, really enjoying my job at the moment. I guess like my kind of next thing that I want to do is become a tech lead. So when you're like in my position, you can also sort of like run the tech for your team and sort of manage those client relationships, but like from a, like a managerial, I don't really want to use that word, but sort of like a higher responsibility and bigger impact role. So I'd want to become a tech lead. And then I guess if we're talking like 5 or more years, then I definitely also want to like run my own company. So I've worked for a few startups now, FIGO being one of them, but I worked for Workin before as both in sort of like data analytics, machine learning roles. But yeah, I think that that's sort of like the next thing for me. I'm very entrepreneurial, but I think now I was just like, I want to learn as much as I can. I want to understand the market. I really want to understand what it's like to like work in a big tech company and also like, get the sort of like funding I'll need for the future. So that was sort of my plan.
Yeah, this is like quite cool on both sides. A question in the chat for Zoe. Zoe, if you're working on projects like that are closely with clients, how often do these projects change? And yeah, so I suppose this is the first question, like what sort of is the timeline of each project? Yeah, basically, and sort of what the distribution is. Do you work on like lots of small projects, so like sprints, like maybe like 1 month on each project, or do you have like projects that take 6 months and you're working on those? So like, what does that distribution look like?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So we have sprints that are like 2.5 weeks, 2 weeks, something like that. And so I'll have projects that I'll be working on. So at the moment, I'm working on 2 projects, and that will be something that like each have their own client that I'm working with on that project. And that's something that I'll be like working through like that 2 week period. But as my sort of like, he's not my manager, but it would be a while if I had to explain to you what his role actually is, but he runs the team. And so he will always tell me that the timeline is always as fast as you can. So, if I finish a project in 2 days and like that's done, I'm working on something else now. So yeah, I would say that they usually take like a couple of weeks, but sometimes I just get given something really random that's like, this is broken, fix it. Like, by today, but like obviously if you can't fix it by today, that's fine. So yeah, the question is, it's like massively varied, but I would say that the like structural projects are the ones that I get for the sprints. That's like a 2 week sprint, might get a couple to do. But there's always stuff like in the pipeline and things that just come randomly, bug fixes, things that you need to do on the stack, like very varied, not just sort of like on the platform, but also like managing the stack. So yeah, can be quite varied. Yeah, at one time I had like 5 things that I needed to do, and they all like very high priority. So
Yeah, this is cool, and I think like so a concern that I have, or like, and I'm sure other people out there have, is like when deciding what to do for your first career, there's like lots of trade-offs to make. Like, do I want a job that has lots of travel, or do I want a job in which like I have lots of large ownership, but maybe isn't as well paid, or these are sort of like some trade-offs people commonly make. Do you have like any advice for like helping to navigate these trade-offs slash making like clear, well-aligned future decisions? So like making decisions that basically means that like 3 or 4 years down the line, you won't be like, oh, I regret making that decision so much.
Yeah, so I'll jump in here. I think this is all about, so 2 points actually. First was all about self-awareness. Secondly, I want to talk about regret. So I think the biggest, most key thing is being aware about what you really value in life. And this is like a psychological point, but it's like being aware of what you love, right? What you like, what you value. Often things like a big name on a CV has value insofar as it helps you get other jobs. But it does not have value insofar as, like, people say, wow, you work at this company, that's so impressive. Like, that gets old really, really quickly. So think about what you really care about. What trade-offs, like, what's the most important thing? Do you value remote work? Do you value the people you work with? Do you value money? Do you value working on things you care about and are interested in? Like, there are like 10, 15 plausible things that one could really value. Introspect and ask yourself what those are. Secondly, I would always avoid this term regret, right? Like, if what I would say is, you make decisions with the information you have at the time. So you can only judge yourself based on that information. Like, if right now it is not reasonable for me to gain more information, this is the information I have. Like, it's like in poker, right? You make a positive EV play, you make the thing that, if repeated many times with the greatest probability, will give you the right outcome. It was still the right choice, even if it led to the wrong outcome, right? Like, you had an 80% chance of winning, unfortunately 20% chance hit, right? Never judge yourself out the outcome, but rather whether you made the right decision with the information at the time. And that's why I think regret is such an ugly emotion, right? The way I always judge is like, with that information, given what I knew, did I make the right decision? And I think, that's how I navigate these two things. So in summary, introspect and don't think about regret in that way, personally.
So I think there's many sort of like aspects or sort of like properties of a job or an environment that you can have. So, one of them is like the role, the location, salary, high ownership. There's all these things. Write down 3 or 4 that are the most important to you. So like, if you were to rank them, like, which are the ones that you really looked out for? For me, it was like a role. So I wanted to be a software engineer. I wanted to be touching code. Like, I could have gone into another industry. I definitely had the skills to do it, but I was like, I want to stay technical. Then another thing for me was like high ownership. I didn't want to be a small cog in a big machine. It's something that, like, after working at a big company, I was like, I don't know about this. And even like interviewing for Google, like, really amazing company, but the interviews felt very much like next, and like it just wasn't impersonal. I want to work somewhere where people would notice if I left, if that makes sense. And then the next thing for me was location. So yeah, I wanted to be in London. You know, I was quite far away, like a university in Scotland. I was like, I want to be closer to home. I also think there's a lot going on in London. That's where I want my home base to be. And then also like salary and basically like compensation. I wanted to be compensated well. And that was something that was important to me. And so every time I was looking at jobs and offers and things, I would be ranking them against these. And Palantir came out like on top, and that's why I went there. And it has been like the best decision that I've ever made, because I knew that I'm fulfilling those things that I really want. And you know, if you have two jobs that fulfill all four, then like make a fifth one. No, just pick the best thing for you, and you'll always feel good about it because you've made that choice very consciously.
Yeah, I agree with like all the points across board there. What do you think are some common misconceptions / mistakes students will make, like with regards to careers, or even just like more generally while at their time at university? I think like most of the people that on this call are probably they're probably like in their second or their first or second year, so they're quite early on, and like preemptively like knowing which mistakes not to make could like probably be like quite impactful. So I'd just be thinking of like what sort of mistakes or things that you think you might have made, or just like things that you would recommend, like paths that you followed that things you think made life like substantially easier.
So you're doing it first, or?
Yeah, I don't mind. So I think I was just gonna like the first thing I wrote down, like as soon as Johnny was saying this question was like, I don't think that I hate the framing of mistake, because, you know, I think that that's like quite harsh, but a common thing that like a common pitfall is potentially just taking the grad role that you get from your internship. So, you know, you land your internship, you get given a grad role, and, you know, it is amazing. Like that is an incredible achievement, but don't just just don't like settle for it. Basically, make sure that like that's still the thing that you really wanted to do, because I had an amazing, like two really amazing internships, and I got grad offers from both of them. I could have easily just been like, right, I don't want to do this during my final year. Like, and final year is like so stressful, and you have dissertation and or like big projects that you have to do. You don't want to be applying for a job at the same time, but still push yourself to do it. Apply for that one other job, or just see something else, just to be like, you know, like, okay, I applied for something else, and now it's a choice, and you're choosing to pick that grad role, as opposed to saying like, oh, I can't really be bothered to look elsewhere. Like if it is the best thing, and like that's the company that you want to go for, then this information or this advice doesn't really apply to you. But just don't like settle for it. Apply elsewhere. I was like, okay, I have 2 grad jobs, like let me get 2 more. And then that was just kind of what I did. I was like, I go out and go and do these interviews and get them. And then at the end, you just feel happy about the things that you choose, because you know that you really like consciously chose it.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I really want to 100% echo what Zoe just said, because I probably won't start at McKinsey, even though people, they say, oh, it's amazing, it's this. I know what I want to work on. I think you need to value yourself more. Like, think about it. Your job is like 9 to 5 minimum. That's such a great proportion of your waking day. And if you settle on that, it just shows you have no value for your time. Like, if you value yourself, then you must go out and find things you actually love, right? Like, you wouldn't settle in other areas of your life. So it's really weird and bizarre people do this, right? Completely agree. 2 more points for me. Firstly, I think a lot of people self-select themselves out of processes. They think, I'm not good enough for this firm, so I'm not going to apply, which is often just not the case. Like, I've seen so many super intelligent people be like, I'm so surprised I got the first round interview. Like, oh my gosh. And I'm like, no, you're really talented. You're really, like, you have so much on your plate. You've done so much. And of course you've got that role, right? Like, self-selecting your way out of things, like, one of the biggest mistakes. Secondly, right, I think insofar as not reflecting well. So I think what a lot of people do is they do not actively reflect after rejections, and there's a really smart way of doing this. Like, at least I think so. At least, so what I'd recommend is having a group of friends who also want to get to similar positions as you. Having a group you can bounce ideas off is so useful. At the end of every single one of my interviews, I voice noted what happened in the interview, the questions I was asked, when the interviewer's face changed. I hypothesized what my answers were. I was like, I said this, I thought it was a good answer because of this. And my friend's like, no, I actually think you shouldn't have said that. There's a reason why they frowned at that point. And that learning process taught me so much about interviews. Like, it's an iterative process, right? The biggest problem in interviews is that you don't get feedback. And that's actually what my startups are trying to solve in terms of, getting careers. But you have to solve that problem for yourself. You have to try and improve. And given in a world where there's no feedback, there is no mark scheme, it's really hard to do that. So you have to take the time out to reflect. I see people who apply to hundreds of jobs, put in effort, but they're putting in effort in the wrong places because they're not reflecting. And it shows because they don't get many places.
Sorry to unmute. I forgot to unmute myself. Yeah. So we've got another question in chat from Tom. Do either of you have any tips from taking something from like a coffee shop idea to a successful growing startup? I like that frame, like the idea of like coffee shop idea, like something that you haven't really talked about. Like what is like a good process? Well, Zoe has like experience working in startups. We worked in the same startup, and Amir obviously like lots of expertise there. So I think it's really like pretty interesting takes from the both of you.
Oh, sure. Two main things for me. The first one is just go out and goddamn do it. Like, people say this as if there's something stopping them. Like with a job offer, the company can reject you in this. There's no one stopping you in the world of business, right? Like, as long as you're 18 years old in the UK, you can register a company, limited company, you can do it, you can gain the information, you can Google it. Like, it's an absurd question because there's nothing stopping you but yourself. Like, when I did my first company, I was staying up till 4 a.m. In my house when my friends were there. We were like brainstorming on like a mini whiteboard I had. Then we allocated the tasks and we just go ahead and did it. Like, we just allocated what needed to be done. We did it. Like, that is the most simple advice I can give to you is just go and do it. Like, do something, put something out into the world. And that's the biggest thing. If you don't take anything away, it's that. The second thing there is about, especially with startups, your startup is risky because it's a startup. It's not a regular business. You don't know exactly how it's going to work. So what you have to do is you want to work lean insofar as when you're creating a new business no one's done before, there are certain assumptions you're making about the way the world works, and you want to test those assumptions. So I'll give you an example. One of the assumptions we're testing right now is we're writing articles on advice on how to get into companies. And there is so much advice out there, and our entire platform relies on the fact that people are willing to pay for this advice. Like, our riskiest thing is there's so much out there. Will anyone pay money for what we're writing? Like, that's our riskiest assumption. So what we're doing is we didn't code anything. We just wrote one article and we showed it to people. We're like, are you willing to pay £10 for this article? 4 out of 6 people that we surveyed actually paid us £10. So what we're doing is we're not doing the whole thing. We're testing stuff in the most lean way possible that tests our core assumptions such that it gives us validation as to either to pivot, change, or to move forward. And for startups, especially startups that are risky or have not been tried before, that's the best advice. Look on Y Combinator. In the startup school, they have some amazing videos. A lot of the stuff I got is from there. Read The Lean Startup, read Running Lean as a book. But there's so much great information out there. If you're running a business, I recommend, I've got it here. It's called Traction. You can't see it. It's called How to Get a Grip on Your Business. Incredibly useful. So yeah, and message me on LinkedIn if you want anything further than that. But yeah, hopefully that is useful in comparison.
Yeah, so I think that's like amazing advice, and I just want to like echo everything Amir said. Definitely that idea of like staying lean, so making sure that your idea is sort of like initially feasible. We talk a lot about MVP, so most viable like product. Make it like a small thing that you can deliver, even if it's without code, just like a basic. How would you do this if technology didn't exist? Do it that way, and then you're like, okay, now let me like improve it with technology. But I want to like almost like abstract away from like saying that your coffee shop idea is like a grand startup. Your coffee shop idea could literally be like, I want to start a blog, or I want to start doing podcasts, or even I want to work for Google, I want to work for Palantir. Like, it starts as an idea, but actually like setting yourself like targets, goals, like how you like make the roadmap to getting there like easier. Like, even if it's like, I want to be a millionaire, okay, how? Like, what are you going to do? What's the first thing that you're going to do? And then what's the next thing? And just even saying deadlines, like, okay, I want to do that by like this time, and then another time. Sorry, this is not really a good example because I don't know how to be a millionaire. But yeah, just like having those like deadlines as well, and realistic deadlines, and trying to like work towards, and what are you actively going to do? What research are you going to do? What people are you going to talk to? What books are you going to read to, or like educate you? Like, we are very educated people. How are you going to educate yourself with the right like knowledge to be able to do what you're doing, or like to do what you want to do? If that's like learning a new language or picking up a new skill, speaking to someone who's worked there before, all those things get you closer to your goal. But like just like having it as like a vague idea, it always feels so far away and maybe quite big. Actually, I always think like the steps to getting there, like build your roadmap and then just execute it.
Yeah, one thing I completely agree with. So like building the roadmap is so key. One thing I like to put on top of that is iterating the roadmap. Often your plan won't go exactly the way it goes, and you have to have your key metrics that you iterate on. So for example, one thing I'm trying to do is in lockdown 1, I gained a lot of weight. I'm trying to lose some of that weight as well. So that's my plan. I had like a roadmap. I was like, yeah, I want to be healthier. It didn't work. I was measuring myself every single day, and I was looking at the scales, and it was just like not going anywhere. So clearly that plan wasn't working. I had to iterate on the plan and change it. So I changed the diet, and that actually worked. And there I could see progress, right? So we often have plans, but I think iterating your roadmap and being constantly evaluating whether it's working is super crucial. Same applies to anything else you do. So yeah, absolutely. Yeah, some great stuff there. Thank you.
Yeah, I super agree with that. Thanks for saying that, Amir. Like, I think the lesson there as well is like be flexible, and like plans can change and things can fail, but also like knowing how, how's that roadmap going to look tomorrow based on this information, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, that's really cool. And I suppose, so like while at FIGO, me and like a question sort of off the back of that, me and Zoe have like spent some time, like along with the founders, spent some time thinking about like what sort of culture we want, or like when we bring in new people, and like what this wants to look like. And I suppose this is like a question that most people don't really think about when applying to companies. They think like this is what my role's going to be like, but they don't really think about like what like explicit choices do I make about sort of people who I'm going to be surrounded with, and like what the vibe at this place is. There's like, I think, another sort of term for culture, like the general vibe that's going to be there. And yeah, so I'd just be interested to like hear, like personally, when both of you apply to companies, what culture do you want there to be, and what choices do you make? Like with regards to like, we want this to be the culture, or like Amir with like, yeah, this is just sort of general. These are things that I want to see in a company that I apply to. I know when I've talked to you in the past, Zoe, that you said that you're like quite set against working for Amazon, for example. Who's just like thinking why this is.
Okay, I won't talk to that, but I'll talk about like the culture that I guess I want to see at a company. Definitely openness. Like, I really think that like learning from other people is so key. Like, why would you want to join a job where everyone's like keeping to themselves and almost like in that like us quite competitive, that they wouldn't want to share with you their knowledge because it might give you a leg up. The idea of like a leg up, very competitive environment, like that's not where I want to work. I want to work somewhere really collaborative where people sort of like help rise you up and everyone's like helping each other. That's not to say that like there's like no hierarchy, because I think that is sort of essential in like companies, especially when you become like larger. But I think that idea of like openness, like working with really smart people, collaboration is something that I really, really value. And just like I just want to work with nice people. Like, I want to work with people who are respectful of others and their differences and things like that. I'd never want to work somewhere where, I don't know, I was made to feel different, for example. And yeah, I think Palantir definitely passed the vibe check. Like in my interviews, like the first sort of like half of the interview is like them just asking you questions of like, why do you want to work here? Like, what really like is what keeps you motivated? Like, why do you want to be autonomous in your work? And they try to get to know you, and that is like they want to make sure that like you're a good culture fit, and that's 50% of the interview, and the other half is like a technical question that's like testing your sort of like academic competence. But they do care about like who you are as a person as well. And like, I'm not going to say the company, but I've worked for other like interviewed for other places where it was just like just another thing in their day. Like it was like an hour in their calendar that they had to do, and I was like, I would get lost in that company. Like I would just be the smallest cog in this massive thing. And so yeah, that's going back to like wanting high ownership and things like that. But yeah, culture is very, very important. I think you can love what you're doing, and you definitely should. And I think that should be the most important thing. But if you don't like, talking to the people that you're working with, then you're also not going to stay at that place.
Yeah, absolutely. I really want to echo that. I think culture is incredibly important to a degree which most people don't understand. It seems like a wishy-washy business concept that people like, execs talk about, but it's genuinely so, so key. First of all, in terms of your life and you enjoy, you wouldn't want to live with people who are boring. You want to live with people, you spend so much of your time around these people. Like logically, it just makes sense. You want them to be people you actually like and are like you, right? It's, from a purely logical perspective. From the point of view of someone who's like, from our startup, we were trying to do culture building. I want to make it somewhere where I would want to work, genuine high ownership, the kind of feedback you give, and it genuinely trickles down. If you have one in which you put like ridiculous amounts of pressure and targets on people below you, they will target people below them, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It genuinely, culture is built like that, and it genuinely trickles down in that kind of way, and you see it happen in companies. And it's like all the way to the top. There are certain places where I go to, like restaurants, and I'm like, I can tell the culture here is bad because all the waiters are angry, because that's the pressure that's come from high up, and you can genuinely tell that within different places. I think for me, it's all about the feedback. Like, do people genuinely care about your development? Do they really care about you as a human being? Like, do they actually care about that above the targets? Do you enjoy spending time with them? Openness, as Zoe said. I think genuine ownership for me personally. Anyone who works partly with our startup or works for a bit of equity. I want them never to do any menial tasks. I never want to be like, all you're doing is menial crap that I don't want to do. I want you to do things that you genuinely love and is building your skill set. We're working together on that. I'm very cautious to make sure the kind of work we give to people is one that is genuinely enhancing. So all those things are super, super key. Like, don't settle, right? Like, it's about not settling. Like, don't sell yourself short to a company that will exploit you. Really value yourself and go out and find something you love doing. It's going to be your 9 to 5 for the next couple of years. So it might be. So, try and yeah, do that.
Yeah, that's super cool. I suppose like some sort of like point that I like to echo, or just that I read recently, or like I heard from like the co-founders of Stripe, was that like good management just sets in place like, and this is sort of what culture is. They set in place like these systems that people work in, and then like there's never like a failure of management. There's like a failure of systems, or like a failure to set up these systems. So like management should actually have like very little work to do. And like if you notice your managers are like this is why like micromanagement is the worst, because it means that your managers haven't set up the systems to like talk to you and work with you properly. So yeah, I mean, that's just like, I know I'm not like part of the panel, but this is just like a little point from me. Okay, wrapping up, and I suppose sort of like a final question. What sort of advice do you have to students out there looking to get into software engineering, or just like just general life advice, I suppose? Yeah, like they want to get into software engineering / AI. They're probably around the same age / background as me. I'm not sure if that's entirely accurate, but yeah, just some closing thoughts, really. Thank you.
Maybe does Amir want to start, or?
I was trying to gather my thoughts. If you mind starting on this one, unless you want to, or
No, that's okay. So I have a few like initial thoughts, but hopefully I'll get more tangible as I go. I think being curious is such an important thing, and it's something that we have like as children a lot. Like, what's this, mom? Like, just asking so many questions. Like, never stop being curious. Never stop like learning and trying to like find out more. And that's what will really help you as a software engineer. I think it's like about learning new concepts, but even just keeping up with like latest technology that tells you, like what kind of industry do you want to work in? What kind of industries are emerging now that maybe didn't exist a year ago or when you started your degree? I always had this idea that studying computer science or wanting to go into computer science, like where you wanted to be when you started is probably, you know, that industry has probably changed so much by the time you actually get there. So yeah, asking questions, which is like something that any panel or anything you go to, they'll say that, but it honestly is like one of the like keys to life. Just ask those questions, learn from the people around you as well. So it's kind of like a tangent point. It's, you know, you're gonna meet like a lot of really cool people or like really smart people. Ask them questions, you know, like how did you learn this? Or like you meet someone from management, how did you get there? Like how did you get to where you are? And yeah, just trying to find out, like, again, about that roadmap. How do you build it? Like work with other people. I guess a specific point as well about software engineering, like practice those fundamentals, like those basic algorithm questions, data structures, how that works. That is going to be so fundamental in your job and also in terms of interviews, because I guess we talked about that a bit. That is what they're going to really want from you. They don't want you to build like some like mad Dijkstra's algorithm or like reinvent this. They just want to know, like, do you know your fundamentals and how well do you know them? And that's just like keep going over that point, especially if you don't study computer science. I think that's really key. Yeah, I think also just, we've said it a lot, but like that thing on like don't settle. You're like extremely smart people, like you go to work, like of course you are, you know, like the world is like very, very open to you. And I learned this at St. Andrews as well. It's like you have a massive like, well, like you have a lot of opportunities essentially, and I think that you are very well placed to go into any industry, any company that you want. So saying like, oh, maybe I'm not smart enough for this company, wrong. Like if you are, and like you just need to figure out how to get there. You probably already have the skills they're looking for, but you just need to make sure that you're practicing with like friends with interviews, or like you know, writing out sort of like algorithm questions. Like you can get to those places, and so don't sell yourself short. And yeah, if you want to start your own like thing, do it. There's nothing stopping you there as well. So yeah, just trying to like do things, stay resilient, and yeah, keep learning.
Yeah, I think from me, the main thing, I think you've always got to back yourself, like, because if you don't, no one else will. And this seems like a vague, wishy-washy thing, but let me add some concrete to it. Throughout whatever you do, failure is certainly going to hit you. There's loads of things around the corner. In my second year, I had 0 internships, nothing in jobs, and then, you know, the next year I had several of those internships. What I mean when I say back yourself, I mean a very specific thing. I mean, use your mind to evaluate how you really feel about the path you're on. Like, often deep down, when you feel uncomfortable, you feel scared, is because your feelings are trying to tell you something. You often follow those feelings. And if you think, oh, maybe I'm not doing things in a smart way, or I should be reflecting, or I keep on failing my interviews, you'll feel bad about that. But to back yourself is to take that feeling and transmute and ask yourself why, and come up with a tangible plan, as Zoe mentioned, to change that, right? Like, you backing yourself means feeling bad about something and using that to create an action plan and then iterating on that action plan. That is how you overcome things, right? I know I didn't have a single internship in my second year, although I had a very systematic approach in terms of, you know, trying to get those jobs. I asked the people around me. I, you know, had a big spreadsheet. I kind of, you know, did that reflection thing that I mentioned earlier. I met up with the consultants from the firm I wanted to work at, right? Like I messaged them on LinkedIn. I went out my ways. Ultimately, if you're doing the same thing again and again and you're still failing, that makes a lot of sense. That's, you know, if you repeat the same experiment, most likely get the same results. So it's about taking those feelings. If you do feel inadequate, you feel like a failure, and back your own mind to solve those problems and consistently iterate on that, I think is a thing that, you know, really helped me. Because when I believe in my plan, I ignore the past failures because I believe in the plan in every single moment. And if I don't believe in the plan, I iterate on the plan, and eventually it gets me there.
Okay, that's awesome. Thank you both so much for your time. Yeah, I know, like, personally, you've both been like hugely helpful, and I'm sure like your work's also been like super helpful to the people watching the call. If there are any like leftover questions in chat, just because I know both of you quite well, I'll try and, I won't obviously answer any company specific things, but I might just go and get some of my thoughts, slash that I think you might ask, especially if they're more like generic questions. Or I'm always happy to go back and ask you both personally. Okay, awesome. Thank you so much for both of your time, and I think we'll all be leaving the call now, just to let Connor take over. Cool. See you.
Thanks for inviting me. Bye.
Good stuff.
See you later. Thank you very much, Johnny. And to you guys, Zoe and Amir, who's just left. Also to Neel and Michael from the previous panel. That was some great advice, and certainly some things that I'll be taking forward from now. What a brilliant end to the summit. I think during lockdown, it's easy to forget to what extent success relies on humanity and how a conversation can change the course of your life. I'd like to personally thank Chirag, Asma, Tony, Paolo, and Chris for kicking off the first of what we hope to be an ever-growing annual event. All of their interesting talks and careers panel will be immortalised on our website, so make sure you hop on there if you've missed any. To the end of a milestone event like this is a really good time to look at what we've achieved so far and to give you a glimpse of the future of the society and how you can be involved in that future. 11 months ago, we set out to inspire the student community about the potential that AI holds in every discipline. We also aim to provide an environment where people can work together in learning how to implement these models that are changing our world. Our third and final aim was to connect people, not only within the student body, but beyond and into industry like we've seen today. There are a phenomenal number of well-established companies using artificial intelligence, and the startup scene for AI is looking really promising. We saw the society bridging the gap between university and career success. These three goals are summed up into our slogan: to inspire, to educate, and to connect. So, how have we done so far? I had some fun looking at our stats. We now have a total of over 1,500 people following across our social medias. Our Facebook events have reached almost 9,000 people this month alone. And our very own social media website, check that one out if you haven't already, has attracted an average of just over 5 new members every day since its launch 25 days ago. And I've just seen this weekend, we've already got about 20 more people on there. Our goal to educate began with a Discord project group, complemented nicely with the A to Z of AI Instagram story series, which still remains on our highlights for you to read. This eventually evolved into a fully fledged student project system that we're now running on the website that I mentioned earlier, where every Tuesday you can browse the currently running projects and talk to people doing things that interest you. In addition to this, you can start a project from scratch or learn from scratch with our weekly machine learning and Python courses given by myself and Joe, also Chanan and Tom. No pandemic is going to get in our way. Strong online representation comes with its benefits as people can share their well-documented project successes to their own social medias. This idea led to another feature of the website, the recently launched student articles system. This is a way of documenting your findings, helping others, and building your own tangible AI portfolio, all through simply writing up your work. But we didn't stop there. Whilst the student community alone holds an incredible potential for learning and discovery, we felt in order to get a complete view of the field, we ought to get some professionals in. Our exec have gone to huge efforts carefully selecting the best speakers to run not one, but 2 speaker series this term, and also, of course, the summit we find ourselves at now, bringing knowledge and experience from quite literally across the world to our university. So, what next? Let's look to the future. The journey we've been on to get to this point is quite incredible, and we're keen to share this experience with some more people. We're looking to add to our exec family in the coming weeks, particularly with AI and machine learning know-how. So make sure to check the social media and the recruitment section of our website for more details coming soon. There will also be opportunities arising in the near future for freshers to get involved and representatives from other disciplines. Finally, I'd like to thank you for coming this weekend, and to the whole exec team for making all of this possible, and to the people who helped along the way. None of this would be possible without you guys.